and welcome back to Behind the Lab. I'm Tom Morrissey, the Artistic Director for Theater Now.
And I'm Colleen Harris, I'm the Managing Director. This is our series where we talk to the writers in our Musical Writers Lab to discover more about their process and their projects. And today we're delighted to bring you Kenny Harmon and Steve Wallace, some of the newest members of our Musical Writers Lab.
If you'd like to find out more about Theater Now New York, you can visit our website at www.tnny.org. And our Instagram handle is TheaterNowNY.
And also make sure that you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, here's Kenny and Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Wallace. I'm a composer.
Hi, I'm Kenny Harmon. I am the book writer and lyricist.
I'm so glad to have you here with me today. So we're going to be talking a lot about all of your various projects, and we're going to get to hear some clips from shows that you're working on. But before we get into those specifics, I'd love to hear more about generally, what is your writing style?
Oh man, so I'm pretty multi-genre. I even to the part where I kind of don't believe in genre anymore. And I think that comes from well, I guess we'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's a variety of things from my training in classical music to growing up on the South Side of Chicago, around hip hop, R&B, and gospel. So all those things take a play. I think what it really comes down to for me is good storytelling and soulful sounds. So that could be in a variety of different genres. So I try to achieve a soulful feeling no matter what I'm doing, and then to be in narrative is a big part of what I like to bring across.
Great storytelling and soul. How about you, Kenny?
Good question. I think for now I would say that I like direct, straightforward, some would say simple, but I would say, I would say direct, real, honest, writing that kind of cuts to the centrality of the situation and the character. And that's what I try to keep centered, is really kind of going into the mind of the character that I'm writing for, and their situation and their mindset, and helping the audience to get kind of some illumination into that.
Great. Steve, you mentioned that a lot of different genres can sort of flow through you. And I'm guessing that means you've listened to a lot of different types of music growing up. Can you tell me a little bit more about some musicians that may have inspired you?
Yeah, it started when I was maybe 4 or 5. I was infatuated with the Wiz soundtrack, the Quincy Jones produced version of Motown Records, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross. And one of the reasons, I wanted to be the lion so bad that I used to walk around the house with like a toilet paper hanging out my pants, like it was my tail. You know what I mean? And I'm a mean old lion, and I walk. And my mama made me sing the lion song to her friends and like Bible studies and stuff like that. They would come to the house. But it started. Every day I used to go and listen to, I'm dating myself, the actual vinyl, like the record, and just listen to it over and over again. And what I didn't realize is that how many genres I was getting at one time. I think that totally laid the foundation for my musical concept of life. I mean, Quincy was bringing in classical music, jazz music, and disco and soul and everything, whatever genre or non-genre mixture that was happening. Even like that version of Can You Feel a Brand New Day is like 9 minutes long, and like I play it for my students when I teach. I play it for my students, and that's my marker for like, have I taught these students well enough? Can they sit and listen to 9 minutes of this, and then tell me like, what did you hear? Because it goes through everything. It's amazing. So that was one thing. The Wiz, like listen to the Wiz every day from like 4 or 5 years old, and the other thing was hearing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata the first time. And when I heard it, my sister and I were taking piano lessons at the same time. And I quit from that teacher and I started back up on my own tutelage later on. But there I was exposed to Beethoven because my sister was learning Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. And I would sit and listen to it at like 5 or 6 years old, and I was like, this is fascinating. I love this so much that I got the B encyclopedia from my parents' front room, and I like took it out. So the whole encyclopedia thing was like leaning like this because B was missing. I left it in my room, and I would just read about Beethoven like every day. I'd go listen to the Wiz, and I'd read about Beethoven because when I heard it, it felt like music from my church. You know what I mean? Like, or it felt like soul music to me. It didn't feel like classical. I didn't know what I just like this dude named Beethoven like 200 years ago wrote this thing, and or to however long ago, and I love it. It was so soulful to me, and so then I got infatuated with his life and stuff, and like and just kind of seeing how it's a fascinating story. So I think those were the two pinnacle moments for me, and then everything sort of bloomed out of that, I believe.
What a beautiful, clear memory of hearing your sister play that song on the piano and then rushing to learn more about it. I feel like, Kenny, that works with your directness of character. You could just do this one snapshot in time and you've got Steve Wallace. There he is.
Yeah.
How about you, Kenny? Do you have
I'm kind of embarrassed because I do not, Steve was, so one of the things that I think we'll get into is that I think Steve and I both have a similar melange of styles. Like we just were exposed to everything. I was trying to think, what was my Beethoven example? And it really wasn't, I grew up with pop and R&B soul, 70s, 80s, stylistics, Motown, on the 8-track, which is dating myself. And then every once in a while, my mother would put on the classical station that was just soothing. And so I knew I loved it, and she and I loved it. But I didn't discover a specific composer per se until much later. But it was the same kind of introduction to different styles of music. And the one thing I thought is like, I wonder if that's the experience of African Americans in music, where like you got to do everything because you don't know where the next job's going to come from, and you just end up like synthesizing everything and just taking it all in. So I think being exposed to classical and pop, I think my next big interest is musical theater in college. I had a roommate who introduced me to Sondheim properly, because I did Into the Woods in high school, but that's not real Sondheim, I don't think, although, I don't think so. And I didn't get it, but he really sat me down and, made me listen to the big three, The Company, Little Night Music, and Follies. And that kind of got me into the musical theater thing. And then Les Mis and Phantom got me more into the opera thing, which led me down kind of an opera path for a while. So it was a mix, but I think it starts with pop and R&B soul.
So it sounds like there are a lot of similarities there of how you guys first got interested in music, at least as kids. And eventually you found your way to each other. So I'd love to hear that. How did you meet and how did this partnership form?
Sure. So we were a blind date set up, or an arranged marriage date in BMI. So we both started the BMI program, the BMI layman angle. Steve will get that right in the next cut, musical theater writing workshop. I was a lyricist, he was a composer. And at the end of our first year, we do a 10-minute musical. And the instructors pair us up. So clearly they thought we would be a good match. We were not paired up during the first year, just randomly, but that final project for the first year, we were paired up. And the rest at this point is history and present.
I don't know who the matchmaker over there at BMI is, but they seem like they always do really good work.
They do.
They got a good ear for that. Steve, how do you remember that first meeting?
Yeah, so it was BMI Layman Angle, a workshop for composers and lyricists. I think.
Thank you.
Official. Not that, I mean.
That's why there are two of us.
So it was very, very similar. It was the sort of, I thought they just kind of picked their names out of a hat. I don't know how they did it really, but you think it was more, they were like, yeah, let's get these guys. Well, anyway, so I was glad that it happened, because I mean we had already like like side comments during class and stuff. And actually, this leads into like some of the work that we're doing now. I presented a piece in the Lehman Angle workshop, and this is probably the first time I connected with Kenny. I was like, yeah, I like this dude. I did. Everyone has to do a Blanche Dubois song, right? That's kind of the thing. Like you have, so like even like Bobby Lopez and all these people from years, they all have a Blanche Dubois songs from Streetcar. So when I read it, I thought, oh man, she's an opera diva because like I was trained as an opera singer and I've written some operas and stuff before this, and that's kind of how got me into the program. So I was like, she's an opera diva, right? So I wrote an opera aria, like literally for Blanche Dubois, and they had their whole take on it that they weren't really feeling that. They were like, it sounds like Verdi and blah blah blah, whatever. Which is, I appreciate that. Because I know where they were coming from. They want me to come from, me as opposed to like cribbing other people's styles. But Kenny's comments, he was like, yeah, I love this. And I was waiting for the cabaletta, and I was like, oh, this guy, he knows what's up. Okay. So then I was like, okay, he must have some like opera history knowledge and stuff like that. So then we started to connect on that level, and being that, coming from an African American background and stuff too, and having that connection with classical music, it was a way for me to think about, it'd be good to work with him on something like that,
It was, so Steve is being a little modest because it was kind of a double whammy. It wasn't, this thing was like a 6-minute opus and he sang it. And so, I mean, he's got an amazing voice. And I just remember, I just kept smiling because there was this wall rattling grand opera piece. It was a Shayna, and I just thought that this is just great that he can do this and both compose it and sing it. It was great. I still love it. It was just such a great moment.
I gotta say, it was easier for me to picture you as a little kid being the lion from The Wiz than it is for me to picture you as Blanche Dubois. But the way that Kenny describes it, I can see it. I can see it now.
Yes, it's great. It's just great.
So those wonderful moments brought the two of you together. And while you were at BMI, you wrote Humpty's Hatching Day together, which is a 10-minute musical that's going to be part of Theater Now's Soundbites 7.0 Festival of 10-minute musicals. And we're going to see a clip of it in just a few minutes. You're also working on the Count of Monte Cristo. So obviously this partnership is working out. You're still working together. I'm wondering what it is about this partnership that brings out the best in you. How does your partner elevate your craft?
Yeah, so I think it goes straight into Humpty's Hatching Day was the first time when we collaborated together. And so I can tend to be a little bit like wanting the dramatic ending and the curtain to fall and like Tosca jumps off the top of the castle. Spoiler, I'm sorry if you haven't seen Tosca. But though he has the opera background and stuff too, but with Humpty's Hatching Day, so I wanted to make do something with the nursery rhymes, and I had been reading them to my daughter and stuff. I was like, well, what are the real stories behind these nursery rhymes? And he was like, oh, okay, cool. So let's start with Humpty, because I like the idea of him being like, what if he's like this distraught like poet or something, and he goes and like jumps off the edge of the wall to like die, And he was like, maybe not that, So it became what the brilliant idea that he came up with of him. Well, I don't want to spoil that either, but he doesn't die. I just put it like that. And that, I think that's one of the things, is that he brings light into my storytelling, and where I may want to be like more like crash and boom and destruction, and then it'd be like this little light at the end, and then like and then everyone feels great, So that's definitely part of it, and also being able to speak about things, knowing that we have a similar background and experience. So the communication, there's less communication hurdles. So it's like, okay, you remember, this song from '87 that came out by whoever. I mean, I won't name names, but like it was real simple with like that. Oh, you remember that Boyz II Men song that went like, or not even Boyz II Men, like even something a little less, Rick James did, blah, blah, blah. And then we don't have to say much about it. We both experienced that way. At the same way, I could be like, okay, second actor Hoffman, you remember when that, and he's on the level with me on that too. So I really appreciate that.
It's fantastic. How about you?
Yeah, the same. I it's great to hear that you think I bring lightness, because I feel like I bring you a little to the left. Like
oh, really?
You give me this idea, and I'm like, oh, that's great. What about this? Which is why we have Humpty as we do.
I think
I also appreciate the frame of reference, because I do. Yeah, I feel like in both the pieces, we'll just throw out a piece and it like, oh yeah, I see where you're going with that. And we can just move. Speaking of moving, the thing I appreciate most about Steve, and I admire most about him, is that he's so prolific. He's got a movie, which we'll talk about later, but I think he's released at least 2 albums during the pandemic. Like he's always creating, and he, as the music comes, he spits it out. Like there's none of this, questioning or doubting. He's like a vessel. And I know for my writing, I get caught sometimes struggling to find the words. Are they good enough? And he's always just like, just right, and we'll make it work. And it's he's kind of an inspiration in that manner, just someone who follows his artistic muse and just goes for it. Yeah, so that's one of the things I really appreciate a lot.
That's great. I struggle with that too sometimes, Kenny. I'll come up with a great idea and I think, I'm going to save this great idea
for when I have a collection of great ideas.
Yep.
I don't want to waste it on this one thing that I don't really care that much about or whatever. And I need to have a little bit more of a confidence that I will continue to have other great ideas. I don't need to hoard them. You know what I mean? Because I don't need to hoard them.
So that's something that I also really respect about you, Steve, that prolific nature.
Yeah. There's two types of brilliances. Two types of brilliance. Two types of brilliance. I think that sounds better. That in my studies of like the greats and the geniuses of throughout the years. So there's these two types, and I go back to the classical music reference because everyone can kind of connect to it. It's a Beethoven and there's a Mozart. Okay, Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies. Mozart wrote like 60. Okay, now if you study them and see like how they wrote and their approach to doing what they did and why they did it, then you can kind of understand why and more about their personalities. So with a Mozart, and both of them are equally brilliant in different ways, right? So with a Mozart, if you watch the movie, he's sitting there throwing a billiard ball around the table and just writing notes, or the story where he's writing the overture for Don Giovanni in the carriage ride. You know what I mean? He was that kind of guy. He was just like, okay, this is D minor. Okay, cool, right?
Right.
But then the Beethoven was like, he always now practically he had a book with him, which he called his Talgo book, which means a talk book, because he was going deaf, and everyone wrote down what they were saying to him because he couldn't hear them. But in that same Talgo book, he had musical notations all through the book. And that's because he would only write off of inspiration. He wouldn't force himself to do anything, and he would save his little ideas and put them to the side and okay, when I write that's when I'm getting to it, So and that's where you have, some like a Stevie Wonder versus or a D'Angelo. D'Angelo has been put out two albums, maybe, right? No, three albums, and his career has been like 25 years long. You know what I mean? But like Stevie Wonder, like during the whole 70s, like he wrote like 1 million albums.
Yeah, he just spits them out.
You know what I mean? So is one more brilliant than the other? No, but I think there's those two lanes, I think, that where most people kind of come from as artists. It's like, do I hold on to it and wait for it to come together this certain way, or do I just
spit it out?
Yeah, Tupac, Tupac was like that too. You know what I mean?
Some people are really lucky and inspiration hits them a lot, and some people learn how to create inspiration, like cultivate it through work and technique. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think I wish that I was the former, but I might be the latter, and I need to put myself to it a little harder.
You and me both. You and me both. Theater now helps, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure having those bi-weekly meetings where sometimes you're presenting your work can really help. Sometimes deadlines can keep you going. So let's talk now how you got involved with Theater Now. Before you became members of our Writers Lab, you actually first came to us by submitting to our Soundbites Festival of 10-Minute Musicals with your show, Humpty's Hatching Day, that you wrote at BMI. We're going to show a clip from it momentarily. But before that, Kenny, can you tell me a little bit about the show, Humpty's Hatching Day?
And it tells basically the story of how Humpty came to the wall and hatched and what happened after that. And so you get to meet Humpty, a little slice of his life, and a few of his good friends.
Now let's see a clip from Humpty's Hatching Day. This animated version was presented as part of Soundbites Streaming Live, which was our socially distanced version of our 2020 festival. And the animations were done by Reginald William Butler. I think you'll really enjoy them. The cast here, the voices are Chester Gregory, Esjae, Asa Arnold, Charles Burks, and Kaylin Lee Clinton. And you're going to see Humpty arriving at a party where Jack Sprat is at the door, and also Humpty's crush, Jill. Here's Humpty's Hatching Day by Kenny Harmon and Steve Wallace.
Yo, Humpty, you're late for your own party. All right, gotta make that splash.
Jack, my sprat, this party's hot, no doubt.
You're a good egg, Hump. You know we had to turn it out.
Hi, Humpty, love the new suit.
Thanks, Jill. The little tiara's cute.
A little bling, right?
You have the coolest style.
And we put it to use, went the extra mile.
Humpty, wow, it's your special night. You hatch tomorrow.
Yeah, you got that right.
I can't wait to see what you'll be. In the meantime, save a dance for me.
First dance?
Hold on, Spud, I got you beat. She'll promise to take the first dance with me.
Yeah, sorry, it's spoken for.
Wait, are you two?
Well, we're not sure.
When Humpty Dumpty report to the dance floor.
What? All right, my night. My night. Why's my chest so tight? I'm dizzy.
Yo, she get busy. Let's do the excellent for our boy Hum.
I see that you want it.
Yeah, you want it, want it.
I know you can taste it.
Flavor.
No need to rush it, slow it down. Don't wanna waste it.
It's too good to waste, come on.
You're gonna love it.
It tastes so good.
It's nutritious.
Got all the vitamins, Spud.
Hitting the spot, your wish come true. It's so delicious.
What's it called, y'all?
Egg salad.
Toss it up.
Egg salad.
Stir it up.
Egg salad.
Mix it up.
Make it chunky. Egg salad.
Spice it up.
Egg salad.
Serve it up.
Egg salad.
Fill me up.
Yummy, yummy.
Music is thumping. Got something to prove. My heart is jumping.
Makes me wanna move.
You make the best night of my life. Let's keep it pumping. Keep up the groove.
My heart is broken.
Egg salad.
Romeo, yeah.
Egg salad.
This is the worst night of my life, and I ain't joking.
Egg salad.
Toss it up.
Egg salad.
Stir it up.
Egg salad.
Mix it up.
Make it chunky. Egg salad.
Spice it up.
Egg salad.
Serve it up.
Egg salad.
Fill me up.
Yummy, yummy.
Hey Jill,
Yeah.
want some fresh air? Maybe up to Well Hill? The moon jumping contest is supposed to start around 10.
Sure, Jack. Hey, we'll be back.
Hey, where you going? Where you going? Where you going?
I love that animated version. Reginald William Butler did an amazing job with those characters. But we're hoping that it will be done in person as soon as it is safe to do so. What will you guys be looking to get out of that development process, as well as any future prospects for Humpty's Hatching Day?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely looking to get it on its feet. I told Kenny not too long after we wrote this, I had a dream that I was dressing up like that I was on Broadway dressing up as Humpty to go on stage. So I don't know. And he was like, really? And it was before we got into sound bites too. And then we got into sound bites a couple of months later or something. But So seeing it on his feet would be awesome. I mean, the cartoon version is definitely a special thing unto itself. So we want to see where we can go with the cartoon version. And then also, we did talk about possibly bringing in other nursery rhymes and doing more of like vignettes of different nursery rhymes, you know, as a complete piece. That each section is sort of a world to itself, but it could have like some overlapping characters. So that was a discussion we had as well.
Now let's pivot and talk about your newest show, your first full-length musical together, which is an adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo, that wonderful old novel. What first brought the idea of doing this story to your minds?
I mean, I read it years ago, and it's on my top like 5 of the classic novels for me. And just kind of the scope of the arc of the whole story and the main character spoke to me when I read it. But I started looking at it more currently, and then I started thinking about setting up the concept as if it's more allegorical than literal. I mean, it is the literal story is happening as it's written, but that different people sort of represented different things in the perspective of how I was viewing it when I read it last. So I brought it to Kenny as an idea, and I laid out some groundwork for those kind of pillars, but just sort of the main character representing the Black man in America or Western society, and all the other aspects around that sort of hinder and limit the progress of the Black man within Western society. That makes sense. And Kenny can elaborate more on it. We've talked about it.
Yeah, and so then I do feel like at this moment I'm kind of moving it a little bit to the left. Once again, just because it's one of the interesting things about an adaptation or any piece of theater is that you have to translate your initial idea and your intentions through a theatrical and universal lens. So it's understanding kind of what's the essence that you want to communicate. Moving kind of from an allegory to just being able to inject wherever possible the experience of African-American men. One of the things, again, that I appreciate about Steve is I knew the novel, but as I started doing some digging, I thought, we still deal with a lot of the same issues. And reading more about Dumas, the author who was mixed race, there was a whole vibrant community of Africans, of Blacks in France at that time, because we thought, we'll have to update the story. And that's not true. So understanding the universality and the fact that these issues were prevalent back then and central back then kind of frees us up to tell this experience without even having to maybe overlay modern times onto it. They are what they are, and they were what they were, and they're the same.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to hear a clip in just a moment. Before we do that, can you tell us a little more about the musical style that we're going to hear?
It's the idea. I'm infatuated with this idea of blending classical and modern things together. So that things can still have a classic feel to it, and connect with like the novels and the stories that have stood so much for such a long time, but then also are relevant and modern to today. So with Count of Monte Cristo, I wanted to create an opera that felt really current.
And
yeah, and that also stretches to the language too. So we're using modern language with some 19th century touches and some 21st century touches. And we're trying to do kind of a quasi song and aria form. We're trying to include some sections that are straight aria and also trying to include some numbers that are more pop sounding, R&B sounding. And so you'll hear that in this clip. It's a good encapsulation of what we're trying to play with over the course of the show.
I also love that it uses all of this modern language and modern musical style, even though it is set in its original time period. I feel like that's something we're seeing a lot now, whether it's with Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette or the show The Great about Catherine the Great, or Hamilton or Bridgerton, where in order for us to see how revolutionary these people are, how against the grain they're going, we can't present them the way they were then because it doesn't seem against the grain anymore. We have to sort of recontextualize who they were in their own time.
Because they're all real people. And the thing about these historical figures is that they become statues, they become sterile monuments. And we're always human, and we're always dealing with human things. And so it's great to I think it allows people to recognize them and identify with them. But I think it also represents the truth of probably who they were back then. They were humans living at that time.
Yeah. You said that way better than I did.
Now let's see if those of you watching on YouTube can pick out all these different language choices and musical styles. Featuring vocals by Steve Wallace, here's the opening number from The Count of Monte Cristo by Kenny Harmon and Steve Wallace.
Not in the least. Not in the least. It's been a long time coming. Long time, at least. It's been a long time coming. Now we feast. Not in the least. Mercedes on the shore, nothing else going on. That woman knew a ship would come through. It was not least, not in the least. No, we feast. It's been a long time coming to an engagement. And that Mercedes coming through. Oh, that dress that shaves the days. No surprise, I give the praise. And it looks so handsome, such a smile. It's all gonna happen, it's been a while. One least, not in the least. I've been waiting for him to propose. If young people these days, who knows? I've been waiting to see this house. What space, what decor. It's been a long time coming. Long time. 7 long years now. 7 long years. At least. Sumptuous cakes. Splendorous flowers. Feasting for days. Chatting for hours. Man, can you believe that mess? A perfect job, a hot wife. Look at this place, front as usual. Shame it's all gotta go out the door for sure. It's been a long time coming. Been watching him take what's mine for you too. Took my job, took my girl, always taking. He's a joke, no mistaking. Time's up, my man. Heard he's making big deals. Hammer's gonna drop, see how that feels. Shame about your girl. Shame about your job. Shame you're just a fraud. And it's been a long time coming. My friends, no, my family. My heart is far too full within this moment. People say a man shouldn't cry, but there's no shame in what I feel. There's no shame in these tears of joy and pride, of knowing I am worthy of Mercedes, my love. A man gets a dream in his heart, an idea, a spark, makes him want to be something, 'cause he knows someday there will be someone that will love him, be his peace and be his home. Every man desires a chance to prove he's more than what he seems. Every man desires a chance to make his mark and live his dreams. When he finds his way, every man desires a love he belongs to. Mercedes, I belong to you. Mercedes, you're just a my sweetest thing. Sing about that song. Sing it just a my dearest one. And nothing can come, nothing can come. Mercedes. You're under arrest. You need to come with me. What for?
On our engagement day. Edmund, you don't have to go.
Need a party bum rush and the police nice touch. All in the details, my man. Don't show out for this crowd. Ditch that swagger, come with me now. Leave now, state the charges if you can. Your mouth is gonna get you in trouble, man.
He can talk to us any kind of way. What's he done? What's his crime? Doing this now in front of family. This is crazy.
This is a gonna tell me. That's enough, he's coming now. Men, take him down.
You may be noticing a pattern here of literary adaptations. We had nursery rhymes, and then we had an old novel. Steve actually has two other projects based on literary works. The first one we're going to talk about is Hal King, which is a movie that came out on February 9th. Steve, could you tell us more about Hal King?
Yeah. Hal King is a modern adaptation of Shakespeare's King Henry IV and V, set in a Midwestern Black American town during the late 1950s. So Hal, who is Prince Hal in the Shakespeare, is he's young Hal in this version, and he's just living a life, just hanging out, doing whatever he wants to do, going to jazz club, drinking, smoking, hey, party. And his dad's a local politician, community leader, and wants him to be more responsible. So that's kind of the essence of the setup. He goes through his coming of age story, and then he also he ends up getting drafted to the Korean War, comes back home, and as a changed person, and begins to see this young lady who we met earlier in the show, who's actually the daughter of his father's political rival. Aha! So we got the star-crossed lovers thing going on there. But she is supposed to get married to this guy who works for her dad, and that's another problem. And then you got to see it to see what happens.
That's a good commercial.
And you can see it. It is available now on Amazon Prime, iTunes, and YouTube. And we'll have the links to that down below. And you can also find it on many streaming services on demand. So take a look for Hal King. Another of Steve's literary adaptations is George Orwell's Animal Farm, which he is writing with lyricist Daniel Abramson. And Theater Now will be producing a developmental reading of Animal Farm in June. So if you are interested in attending that developmental reading, make sure you're on Theater Now's mailing list. You can do that by going to tnny.org/mailing list. Steve, can you tell us a little bit more about this project?
So 2019, we just started breaking ground with Animal Farm, and I started blending my genres together and stuff. And I won't give away, what I'm doing and what I'm mixing, but it's been well received at the BMI workshop, and doing this with Theater Now will definitely take it to that next level, because we've seen probably about a half an hour of it on its feet, and we've written a bunch more stuff, and we'd like to see it all in context together, to be able to see like the whole show together and see, okay, how is this flowing? So we can take it from there and then move it to the next stage. So hopefully when COVID's over and under control, we can get it on its feet and put some people in some animal costumes and get it going. You know?
In the meantime, Kenny, along with working on Count of Monte Cristo, you're also working on just some individual songs. Can you tell us more about that work?
Overall, I'm just trying to just kind of discover my voice as a writer. And so I find it really interesting right now to take song assignments and figure out what comes out and put it together. And I think I have and just kind of work on the craft a little bit and see how I construct lyric.
Yeah, that's what the lab is all about. So I'm so glad you guys are part of the lab. I'm so glad that you were able to be here with me today. Thank you for sharing your music with us and so many wonderful stories. I really had a wonderful time talking to you.
Yeah, same here.
It was great talking with you too. Thank you for having us.
Yo, Humpty, you're late for your own party. All right, gotta make that splash.
Jack must rap, this party's hot, no doubt.
You're a good egg, Hump. You know we had to turn it out.
Hi, Humpty, love the new suit.
Thanks, Jill. The little tiara's cute.
A little bling, right?
You have the coolest style.
And we put it to use, went the extra mile.
Humpty, wow, it's your special night. You hatch tomorrow.
Yeah, you got that right.
I can't wait to see what you'll be. In the meantime, save a dance for me.
First dance?
Hold on, Spud, I got you beat. She'll promise to take the first dance with me.
Yeah, sorry, it's spoken for.